this. Look at that. Is there anything more frustrating than this? This is shit way to start, man. I'll tell you that. Son of a bitch. Fuck me, man. I spent a whole thing trying to get this. I put it in the freezer to get it back together, to like reconstitute it as a chapstick. Oh, what the fuck? What the shit is this? I took the whole tube. I don't even know if I can do my job right now. You're shitting me. They got chunks? Well, you know what? Hey, you know what? My phone's half charged. It's half charged, and my chapstick shit. And also, we're in a fucking pandemic. So, I mean, how much stuff do you want to deal with? How much stuff do you really need for it to be an issue that you want to contend with? We can all nitpick, right? Public Domain with Kyle Kinane. We know what we're doing. Honestly, this week's charity, anybody suffering from chapped lips that doesn't have access to quality chapstick. I'll say, people not base level, black tube, original flavored chapstick, solid, through and through. You need to think about the climate that you're in. It's hot out. This trash, this vodka lemonade, knockoff lip smackers that I got in a gift bag from a festival, garbage. Now I know, they were supposed to be like, oh, but you know, it would taste delicious like a vodka lemonade that we make. Don't give me a thing that's supposed to do a thing and then it doesn't do the thing. Because guess what? Now I'm going to go back to that tube of chapstick, read who the brand name was, and never purchase their product because they threw me under the bus with their lip balm. And to be honest, it's actually probably whatever Deep Eddy is. I don't have sponsorship, nobody's watching this. I got no money on hand for this. I'm not charging anybody. I don't have sponsorship. So Deep Eddy Vodka, kiss my ass. If you want to gift bag me something, make a better chapstick. The koozie though is high quality. It's better than the cheap ones. All right, Dracula, chapter 12. Donate to something. Frontier Co-op was the one last week that Fortune mentioned on my other show. Chapter 12. Dr. Seward's Diary. September 18th. I drove it once until we have to recap. No, because you guys are just captivated. What's her name? Had crummy cheeks. Dr. Seward's Diary, September 18th. I drove at once to Hillingham and arrived early. Keeping my cab at the gate, I went up the avenue alone. I knocked gently and rang as quietly as possible, for I feared to disturb Lucy or her mother, and hoped to only bring a servant to the door. Her mom died, right? After a while, finding no response, I knocked and rang again. Still no answer. I cursed the laziness of the servants that they should lie abed at such an hour. For it was now 10 o'clock. Honestly, I've been sleeping till noon, so I'm going to cut these servants some slack. And so rang and knocked again, but more impatiently, but still without response. Hitherto, I had blamed only the servants, but now a terrible fear began to assail me. Was this desolation but another link in the chain of doom, which seemed drawing tight around us? The chain of doom is a quality phrase. I knew that minutes, even seconds of delay might mean hours of danger to Lucy, if she had again one of those frightful relapses, and I went round the house to try if I could find by chance an entry anywhere. I could find no means of ingress. Every window and door was fastened, and I locked, and I returned baffled to the porch. As I did so, I heard the rapid pit-pat of a swiftly driven horse's feet. They stopped at the gate, and after a few seconds later, I met Van Helsing running up the avenue. When he saw me, he gasped out, "Then it was you! And just arrived. How is she? Are we too late? Did you not get my telegram?" I answered as quickly and coherently as I could that I had only got his telegram early in the morning and had not lost a minute in coming here. That's right, he got a late telegram. And then I could not make anyone in the house hear me. He paused and raised his hat as he said solemnly, "Then I fear we are too late. God's will be done." With his usual recuperative energy, he went on, "Come, if there be no way open to get in, we must make one. Time is all in all to us now." If you're in a hurry, you don't use flowery phrases. That's my problem. Like, if, we got to get in there. "Come, if there be no way open to get in, we must make one. Time is all in all to us now." You'd be like, "Break in the house." That's what you would say. We went round to the back of the house, where there was a kitchen window. The professor took a small surgical saw from his case and, handing it to me, pointed to the iron bars which guarded the window. I attacked them at once and had very soon cut through 3 of them. That's the quickest way into an old-timey house, is to cut through 3 iron bars. All right. Then, with a long, thin knife, we pushed back the fastening of the sashes and opened the window. I helped the professor in and followed him. There was no one in the kitchen or in the servants' room, which were close at hand. We tried all the rooms as we went along, and in the dining room, dimly lit by rays of light throughout the shutters, found 4 servant women lying on the floor. That's right. There was no need to think them dead, for their stertorous, breathing and the acrid smell of laudanum in the room left no doubt as to their condition. Van Helsing and I looked at each other. As we moved away, he said, "We can attend to them later." Then we ascended to Lucy's room. For an instant or two, we paused at the door to listen, but there was no sound that we could hear. With white faces and trembling hands, we opened the door gently and entered the room. How shall I describe what we saw? On the bed lay... Why is there questions when it's your diary? On the bed lay 2 women, Lucy and her mother. The latter lay farthest in, and she was covered with a white sheet, the edge of which had been blown back by the draught through the broken window, showing the drawn white face with a look of terror fixed upon it. By her side lay Lucy, with face white and still more drawn. The flowers which had been round her neck we found upon her mother's bosom, and her throat was bare, showing the 2 little wounds which we had noticed before, but looking horribly white and mangled. She got sucked off again. Without a word, the professor bent over the bed, his head almost touching poor Lucy's breast, and then he gave a quick turn of his head, as of one who listens, and leaping to his feet, he cried out to me, "It's not yet too late. Quick, quick, bring the brandy." Van Helsing. I flew downstairs and returned with it, taking care to smell and taste it, lest it too were drugged like the decanter of sherry which I found on their table. It's a smart move to always taste some booze before you serve it. Lest it be drugged. The maids were still breathing, but more restlessly, and I fancied that the narcotic was wearing off. I did not stay to make sure, but returned to Van Helsing. He rubbed the brandy, as on another occasion, on her lips and gums and on her wrists and the palms of her hand. He said to me, "I can do this, all that can be at present. You go wake those maids. Flick them in the face with a wet towel, and flick them hard. Make them get heat and fire and a warm bath. This poor soul is nearly as cold as that beside her. She'll need be heated before we can do anything more." I went at once and found a little difficulty in waking 3 of the women. The 4th was only a young girl, and the drug had evidently affected her more strongly, so I lifted her on the sofa and let her sleep. The others were dazed at first, but as remembrance came back to them, they cried and sobbed in a hysterical manner. I was stern with them, however, I would not let them talk. I told them that one life was bad enough to lose, and if they delayed, they would sacrifice Miss Lucy. So, sobbing and crying, they went about their way, half clad as they were, and prepared fire and water. Fortunately, the kitchen boiler was still alive. Fires were alive. There was no lack of hot water. We got a bath and carried Lucy out as she was and placed her in it. Whilst we were busy chafing her limbs, there was a knock at the hall door. One of the maids ran off, hurried on some more clothes, and opened it. Then she returned and whispered to us that there was a gentleman who had come with a message from Mr. Holmwood. They bade her simply to tell him that he must wait, for we could see no one now. She went away with the message, and, engrossed with her work, I clean forgot all about them. I never saw in all my experience the professor work in such deadly earnest. I knew, as he knew, that it was a stand-up fight with death, and in a pause told him so. He answered me in a way that I did not understand, but with the sternest look that his face could wear. If that were all, I would stop here where we are now and let her fade away into peace, for I see no light and life over her horizon. Oof. He went on with his work. With, if possible, renewed and more frenzied vigor. Presently we both began to be conscious that the heat was beginning to be of some effect. Lucy's heart beat a trifle more audibly to the stethoscope, and her lungs had a perceptible movement. Van Helsing's face almost beamed, and as we lifted her from the bath and rolled her in a hot sheet to dry her, he said to me, "The first gain is ours. Check to the king." All right, Van Helsing, let's take it easy. We took Lucy to another room, which had now been prepared, and laid her in bed and forced a few drops of brandy down her throat. I noticed that Van Helsing tied a soft silk handkerchief round her throat. She was still unconscious, and was quite as bad, if not worse, than we had ever seen her. Van Helsing called in one of the women, and told her to stay with her, not take her eyes off her till we returned, and then beckoned me out of the room. "We must consult as to what is to be done," he said as we descended the stairs. In the hall, he opened the dining room door, and we passed in, he closing the door carefully behind him. The shutters had been opened, but the blinds were already down. With that obedience to the etiquette of death which the British women of the lower classes always rigidly observes. The room was, therefore, dimly dark. It was, however, light enough for our purposes. Van Helsing's sternness was somewhat relieved by a look of perplexity. He was evidently torturing his mind about something, so I waited for an instant, and he spoke. "What are we to do now? Where are we to turn for help? We must have another transfusion of blood, and that soon, or that poor girl's life won't be worth an hour's purchase. You are exhausted already. I am exhausted too. I fear to trust those women, even if they would have courage to submit. What are we to do for someone who will open his veins for her? What's the matter with me, anyhow?" The voice came from the sofa across the room, and its tones brought relief and joy to my heart, for they were those of Quincey Morris. Van Helsing started angrily at the first sound, but his face softened, and a glad look came into his eyes as I cried out, "Quincey Morris!" and rushed towards him with outstretched hands. "What brought you here?" I cried as our hands met. "I guess art is the cause." He handed me a telegram. I have not heard from Seward for 3 days, and I'm terribly anxious. Cannot leave. Father's still in same condition. Send me word how Lucy is. Do not delay. Holmwood. I think I came just in the nick of time. You have only to tell me what to do. Van Helsing strode forward and took his hand, looking him straight in the eyes as he said, "A brave man's blood is the best thing on this earth when a woman is in trouble. You're a man, and no mistake. Well, the devil may work against us for all he's worth, but God sends us men when we want them." God sends us men when we want them. Fucking Jesus Christ. Paint that over the doorway of the Eagle over there in Silver Lake. Eagle's a leather bar in Silver Lake. Once again, we went through that ghastly operation. I have not the heart to go through with the details. Lucy had got a terrible shock, and it told on her more than before. For though plenty of blood went into her veins, her body did not respond to the treatment as well as on the other occasions. Her struggle back into life was something frightful to see and hear. However, the action of both heart and lungs improved, and Van Helsing made a subcutaneous injection of morphia, as before, and with good effect. Her faint became a profound slumber. The professor watched whilst I went downstairs with Quincy Morris, and sent one of the maids to pay off one of the cabmen who were waiting. I left Quincy lying down after having a glass of wine. That's right, they booze him up after giving blood. And told the cook to get ready a good breakfast. Then a thought struck me, and I went back to the room where Lucy was now. When I came softly in, I found Van Helsing with a sheet or two of notepaper in his hand. He had evidently read it and was thinking it over as he sat with his hand to his brow. There was a look of grim satisfaction in his face, as of one who has had a doubt solved. He handed me the paper, saying only, "It dropped from Lucy's breast when we carried her to the bath." When I had read it, I stood looking at the professor, and after a pause asked him, "In God's name, what does it all mean? Was she, or is she, mad? Or what sort of horrible danger is it?" I was so bewildered that I did not know what to say more. Van Helsing put out his hand and took the paper, saying, "Do not trouble about it now. Forget it for the present. You shall know and understand it all in good time. But it will be later. And now, what is it that you came to me to say?" This brought me back to fact, and I was all myself again. "I came to speak about the certificate of death. If we do not act properly and wisely, there may be an inquest, and that paper would have to be produced. I am in hopes that we need have no inquest, for if we had it, would surely kill poor Lucy, if nothing else did. I know, and you know, and the other doctors who attended her knows, that Miss Westenra had a disease of the heart, and we can certify that she died of it. Let us fill up the certificate at once, and I shall take it myself to the registrar and go on to the undertaker." "Good! Oh, my friend John, well thought of. Truly, Miss Lucy, if she be sad in the foes that beset her, is at least happy in the friends that love her. 1, 2, 3, all open their veins for her, besides one old man." "What?" "Ah, yes, I know. Friend John, I am not blind. I love you all the more for it. Now go." That's right, it was this fella, the lover, and this young fella showed up in the doctor. My apologies, it's just we're getting on with it. In the hall, I met Quincy Morris with a telegram for Arthur telling him that Miss Westenra was dead, that Lucy had also been ill but was now going on better, and that Van Helsing and I were with her. I told him where I was going, and he hurried me out, but as I was going, said, "When you come back, Jack, may I have 2 words with you all to ourselves?" I nodded in reply and went out. I found no difficulty about the registration, and arranged with the local undertaker to come up in the evening to measure for the coffin and to make arrangements. When I got back, Quincy was waiting for me. I told him I would see him as soon as I knew about Lucy, and went up to her room. She was still sleeping, and the professor seemingly had not moved from his seat, at her side. From his putting his finger to his lips, I gathered that he expected her to wake before long and was afraid of forestalling nature. So I went down to Quincy and took him into the breakfast room. Every meal had a room. Dinner room, dining room, breakfast room, lunch terrace. So I took Quincy down to the breakfast room, where the blinds were not drawn down, and which was a little more cheerful, or rather less cheerless, than the other rooms. When we were alone, he said to me, "Jack Seward, I don't want to shove myself in anywhere where I've no right to be, but this is no ordinary case. You know I love that girl and wanted to marry her. But although that's all past and gone, I can't help feeling anxious about her all the same. What is it that's wrong with her? The Dutchman, and a fine fellow he is, I can see that, said that time you two came into his room, that you must have another transfusion of blood. and that both you and he were exhausted. Now I know well that you medical men speak in camera, and that a man must not expect to know what they consult about in private. But this is no common matter, and whatever it is, I have done my part. Is that not so? All these suitors are just pals now. That's kind of fun. That's so, I said, and he went on. I take it that both you and... All right. We're doing it. We said we're doing it. I take it that both you and Van Helsing had done already what I did today. Is that not so? That is so. And I guess Art was in it too. When I saw him 4 days ago, down at his own place, he looked queer. I have not seen anything pulled down so quick since I was on the pampas and had a mare that I was fond of go to grass all in a night. One of those big bats that they call vampires had got at her in the night, and what with his gorge and the vein left open, there wasn't enough blood in her to let her stand up. I had to put a bullet through her as she lay. Jack, if you may tell me without betraying confidence, Arthur was the first. Is that not so? Everybody getting the vampire blood. As he spoke, the poor fellow looked terribly anxious. He was in a torture of suspense regarding the woman he loved, and his utter ignorance of the terrible mystery which seemed to surround her intensified his pain. His very heart was bleeding, and it took all the manhood of him, and there was a royal lot of it too, to keep him from breaking down. I paused before answering, for I felt that it must not betray anything which the professor wished kept secret. But already he knew so much, and guessed so much, there could be no reasoning for not answering. So I answered in the same phrase, that's so. And how long has this been going on? About 10 days. 10 days? Then I guess, Jack Seward, that pretty poor creature that we all love has had put in her veins within that time the blood of 4 strong men. Man alive, her whole body wouldn't hold it. Then, coming close to me, he spoke in a fierce half-whisper. What took it out? I shook my head. That, I said, is the crux. Van Helsing is simply frantic about it. I am at my wit's end. I can't even hazard a guess. There's been a series of little circumstances which have thrown out all our calculations as to Lucy being properly watched. But these shall not occur again. Here we stay until all be well or ill. Quincy held out his hand. Count me in, he said. You and the Dutchman will tell me what to do, and I'll do it. When she woke late in the afternoon, Lucy's first movement was to feel in her breast, and, to my surprise, produced the paper which Van Helsing had given me to read. The careful professor had replaced it where it had come from, lest on waking she should be alarmed. Her eye then lit on Van Helsing and on me too, and gladdened. Then she looked around the room and, seeing where she was, shuddered. She gave a loud cry and put her poor thin hand before her pale face. We both understood what that meant, that she had realized the full of her mother's death. So we tried what we could to comfort her. Doubtless sympathy eased her somewhat, but she was very low in thought and spirit, and we wept silently and weakly for a long time. We told her that either or both of us would now remain with her at all the time, and that seemed to comfort her. Towards dusk, she fell into a doze. Here a very odd thing occurred. You could call what's happening now an odd thing. While still asleep, she took the paper from her breast and tore it in two. Van Helsing stepped over and took the pieces from her. At the same time, however, she went on with the action of tearing, as though the material were still in her hands. Finally, she lifted her hands and opened them as though scattering the fragments. Van Helsing seemed surprised, and his brows gathered as if in thought, but he said nothing. God damn, this is 1 day? 1 day is what happened here? September 19th. All last night she slept fitfully, being always afraid to sleep, and something weaker when she woke from it. The professor and I took turns to watch. We never let her for a moment unattended. Quincy Morris said nothing about his intention, but I knew that all night long he patrolled round and round the house. When the day came, its searching light showed the ravages in poor Lucy's strength. She was hardly able to turn her head, and the little nourishment which she could take seemed to do her no good. At times she slept, and both Van Helsing and I noticed the difference in her between sleeping and waking. Whilst asleep, she looked stronger, although more haggard, and her breathing was softer. Her open mouth showed the pale gums drawn back from the teeth. She's a fucking man, bro. Which thus looked positively longer and sharper than usual. When she woke, the softness of her eyes evidently changed the expression, for she looked her own self, although a dying one. In the afternoon, she asked for Arthur, and we telegraphed him. Quincy went off to meet him at the station. When he arrived, how are we just like, oh, I guess she got fangs when she falls asleep. We're all just going to accept this? When he arrived, it was nearly 6 o'clock, and the sun was setting full and warm. The red light streamed in the window and gave more color to the pale cheeks. Fuck this bitch's cheeks! When he saw her, Arthur was simply choking with emotion, and none of us could speak. In the hours that had passed, the fits of sleep, the comatose condition passed for it and grown more frequent, so that the pauses when conversation was possible were shortened. Arthur's presence, however, seemed to act as a stimulant. She rallied a little and spoke to him more brightly than she had done since we arrived. He too pulled himself together and spoke as cheerily as he could, so that the best was made of everything. It was now nearly 1 o'clock, and he and Van Helsing are sitting with her. I am to relieve them in a quarter of an hour, and I'm entering this on Lucy's phonograph. Until 6 o'clock, they're to try and rest. I fear that tomorrow will end our watching, for the shock has been too great. The poor child cannot rally. God help us all. There's fortunately a short letter. Mina Harker to Lucy Westrenra. Unopened by her, in parentheses. Unopened. Lucy didn't open no damn letter. 17th of September. My dearest Lucy, it seems an age since I heard from you, or indeed since I wrote. You will pardon me, I know, for all my faults when you have read all my budget of news. Well, I got my husband back all right. When we arrived at Exeter, there was a carriage waiting for us, and in it, though he had an attack of gout, Mr. Hawkins, I empathize there. He took us to his house, where the rooms for all of us, nice and comfortable, we dined together. After dinner, Mr. Hawkins said, my dears, I want to drink your health and prosperity, and may every blessing attend you both. I know you both from children, and have, with love and pride, seen you grow up. Now I want you to make your home here with me. I have left to me neither chick nor child. All are gone, and in my will I have left you nothing. Everything. He left them everything. I cried. Lucy, dear, as Jonathan the old man clasped hands. Our evening was a very, very happy one. Ugh. So here we are, installed in this beautiful house. The house is cool. I need not tell you, arranging things in housekeeping, Jonathan and Mr. Hawkins are busy all day. Jonathan Hawkins, that's the fucking dude. For now that Jonathan is a partner, Mr. Hawkins wants to tell him all about the clients. How's your dear mother getting on? She dead. I wish I could run up to town for a day. He's beginning to put some flesh on his bones again, but he's terribly weakened by the long illness. Even now, he sometimes starts out of his sleep in a sudden way, and awakes all trembling until I can coax him back to his usual placidity. However, thank God, these occasions grow less frequent as the days go on. She said, when are you going to marry? When's this going to happen? Jonathan asked to send his respectful duty. So as you love me, blah, 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 blah. Whatever. She's just being babbly about bullshit, as Mina Harker does. Jonathan Harker. She married him. They're hanging out at the house. Report from Patrick Hennessy, M.D. Some guy with a huge title. 20th of September. My dear sir, in accordance with your wishes, I enclose report of the conditions of everything left in my charge. With regret to patient Renfield, the nutcase. There's more to say. He's had another outbreak which might have had a dreadful ending, but which, as it fortunately happened, was unattended with any unhappy results. This afternoon, a carrier's cart with 2 men made a call at the empty house whose grounds abut on ours. The house to which, you will remember, the patient twice ran away. The men stopped at our gate to ask the porter their way, as they were strangers. I myself was looking out the study window, having a smoke after dinner, and saw one of them come up to the house. As he passed the window of Renfield's room, the patient began to rate him from within, and called him all the foul names he could lay his tongue to. The man, who seemed a decent fellow enough, contented himself by telling him to shut up for a foul-mouthed beggar, whereon our man accused him of robbing him and wanting to murder him, and said that he would hinder him if he were to swing for it. I opened the window and signed to the man not to notice, so he contented for himself after looking at the place over and making up his mind as to what kind of place he had got to by saying, "Lord bless you, sir. I wouldn't mind what was said to me in the bloomin' madhouse. I pity you that and the governor for having to live in the house with a wild beast like that." Then he asked his way civilly enough, and I told him where the gate of the empty house was, and he went away, followed by threats and curses and revilings from our man. I went down to see if I could make out any cause for his anger, since he's usually such a well-behaved man. And except his violent fits, nothing of the kind had ever occurred. I found him, to my astonishment, quite composed and most genial in his manner. I tried to get him to talk of the incident, but he blandly asked me questions as to what I meant, and led me to believe that he was completely oblivious of the affair. It was, I am sorry to say, however, only another instance of his cunning, for within a half hour I heard of him again. This time he had broken out through the window of his room and was running down the avenue. How to break into just a regular person's house? They had to have a saw blade and cut through 3 iron bars to get into the kitchen of just somebody's house because they wouldn't answer the door. This is a loony bin, and this guy can't get out enough. Yet to get into a house, get into a kitchen of 2 old birds' house, we need a saw through iron bars. The fuck is a loony bin got? What do they got? Tinsel hanging up? Like a first generation saran wrap tied between toothpicks to keep these people in? Yeah, he got out through the window. He called the attendants to follow him and ran down the avenue. He was feared he was intent on some mischief. My fear was justified when I saw the same cart which had passed before coming down the road, having on it some great wooden boxes. Men were wiping their foreheads and were flushed in the face, as if with violent exercise. Before I could get up to him, the patient rushed at them, and pulling one of them off the cart, began to knock his head against the ground. If I had not seized him just at that moment, I believe he would have killed the man there and then. The other fellow jumped down and struck him over the head with the butt end of his heavy whip. It was a terrible blow, but he did not seem to mind it, but seized him also, and struggling with the 3 of us, pulling us to and fro as if we were kittens. You know I'm no lightweight. And the others were both burly men. At first he was silent in his fighting, but as we began to master him, and the attendants were putting a straight waistcoat on him, he began to shout, "I'll frustrate them. They shan't rob me. They shan't murder me by inches. I'll fight for my lord and master." And all sorts of similar incoherent ravings. It was with very considerable difficulty that they got him back to the house and put him in the padded room, with apparently a screen window. One of the attendants, Hardy, had a finger broken. However, I set it all right, and he was going on well. Stop putting this dude in rooms with windows. The 2 carriers were at first loud in their threats of actions for damages and promised to rain all the penalties of the law on us. Their threats were, however, mingled with some sort of indirect apology for the defeat of the 2 of them by a feeble madman. They said that if it had not been for the way their strength had been spent carrying and raising the heavy boxes to the cart, they would have made short work of him. They gave us another reason for their defeat, the extraordinary state of drought to which they had been reduced by the dusty nature of their occupation and the reprehensible distance from the scene of their labors of any place of public entertainment. I quite understood their drift, and after a stiff glass of grog, or rather more of the same, in which each a sovereign in hand, they made light of the attack and swore they would encounter a worse madman any day for the pleasure of meeting so bloomin' good a bloke as your correspondent. I took their names and addresses in case they might be needed. There are as follows: Jack Smollett of Dudding's Rents, King George's Road, Great Walworth, and Thomas Snelling, Peter Farley's Row, Guide Court, Bethnal Green. They are both in the employment of Harris and Sons, Moving and Shipment Company, Orange Masters Yard, Soho. I shall report to you any matter of interest occurring here and shall wire you at once if there's anything of importance. Believe me, dear sir, yours faithfully, Patrick Hennessy. This next thing's a letter from Mina Harker. We're going to stop. Let's call this 12 and a half. We got 5 more pages. I barely made it through that one. It was like it gets there and then it is a drag. I don't know what to do. Also, this cape's hot. Garage is hot. It's like 9 degrees out nowadays. All right, Public Domain with Kyle Kinane. We'll get another one of these out. I got no purveying thoughts. Let's do what we gotta do. That was 40 minutes as it was. That's how long a regular chapter is. I got 5 more pages. Get the fuck. All right. Be good, be nice. Thanks for watching or listen. Probably listen at this point. Nobody sat and watched this shit for 40 minutes. There's quality TV shows on. Watch a Breaking Bad for 40 minutes and watch this shit.